Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Cle Jackson, president of the Greater Grand Rapids branch of the NAACP. As many of you are aware, we've been actually engaged in our GOTV, AKA Get Out the Vote efforts here. So on the ground, as well as just, we actually started, I want to say about 3 weeks ago, what we call a live stream, where we are trying to do a number of things in-house, and especially when it comes to our own just technical side of things. And so we started this live stream to have a variety of people on, and it's every Thursday, 6 p.m. And just to kind of take the pulse of individuals in community with respect to what are the issues in this election, but even after this election. And what's the word on the street? Are people excited? Are people fearful? What issues are they having? So we've been hosting those every Thursday at 6 p.m. here at the NAACP Center for Grand Rapids Center for Community Transformation. Of course, has been digital, or I should say virtual. And so as we are doing this last push leading up to November 3rd, we have extended some invites out to some candidates who are running for elected office, and wanted to, again, just kind of do the same with them, just touch base and talk about all things voting, all things election, what's at stake, what are some of the key issues that they are stumping and beating the ground for. And so tonight, we have the pleasure of having a conversation with HIllary Schulten. Welcome, HIllary.
Thank you so much for having me, President Jackson. It's an honor to be here. We are so excited about this race. I am the Democratic nominee for Congress in Michigan's 3rd Congressional District. For those of you tuning in, it encompasses Kent, a portion of Kent, Ionia, Barry, Calhoun, and a little piece of Montcalm. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks to everybody tuning in at home.
Thank you, HIllary. So now this is to, we were just talking a little bit before we came on about Representative Amash and his decision not to run. And so this seat is actually the seat that is currently held by Representative Justin Amash. For all of you who are unaware, now you're aware. And so it is a critically important seat, and it is, you know, I would say a pretty extensive district, and actually a pretty diverse district, what I would say. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. You know, we've got 2 main urban cores, Grand Rapids and Battle Creek. And then the suburbs here play a really big role, the suburbs of Kent County and Battle Creek as well. And then in between there, we have some really important rural regions throughout Barry and Ionia County, and even the northern portion of Kent County. So, you know, it's diverse in terms of landscape, it's diverse in terms of the people, and really diverse in terms of the ideas as well. You know, people politically call this a purple district, a swing district. And, you know, that's not because we got a bunch of moderates in the middle who all agree on everything. You know, politically speaking, you know, this is a district Donald Trump won by almost 10 points in 2016. And yet it encompasses the city of Grand Rapids, which in and of itself is almost 50% of the district. You know, city of Grand Rapids, Bernie Sanders won in the Democratic contest for president in the primary, both in 2016 and 2020. So, you know, obviously, you know, one of the most progressive in the Democratic Party. So, you know, you've got real opposing sides politically as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I would say a dynamic district. So HIllary, you know, we have been in, I think I would say in my lifetime, the worst, most horrific pandemic it seems like ever. You
Yeah.
know, to date, we have over, I believe, 25,000 American lives that have been lost to this. Um, I don't really even know what to call it. You know, it's they, you know, people refer to it as a virus, the COVID-19 virus.
Yep.
And you know, oftentimes refer to it as the invisible enemy that we really don't know where it is, right?
Yep.
Because there's so many different unknowns that we don't know in spite of what the science says and et cetera.
Yeah.
And as you know, this district has been disproportionately impacted when it comes to, you know, jobs and, you know, even when you look at it from a, you know, education perspective,
Yep.
Grand Rapids Public Schools, Dr. Roby decided just to, I think a week or so ago, she held a press conference to keep these young folks out of school until 2021.
I know.
And so even when you look at that, you know, from a unemployment perspective, from even the strain that's been placed on our hospital systems, right? So can you talk a little bit about what your plan may look like with respect to this district, your district,
Yep.
being recovering from this pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think you are so right. There's so much about this novel virus that we don't know, but there are things we know for certain. And that is that the virus has hit our community hard. And as you said, you know, it's had a disproportionate impact on our region. And we know it's had a disproportionate racial impact as well. I've been fortunate to I've been campaigning with Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist these last couple of weeks. He's been helping the campaign, and he's leading, you know, the Racial Disparities Task Force on the virus, and you know, had a chance to, you know, to really understand more of the work that he is doing. So I think, you know, from my perspective, you know, I think it is so crucial that we understand the areas, the people, the communities, the industries that have been hit the hardest, and make sure that we target our efforts at recovery, you know, towards those areas. Here, you know, as we look at, you know, the two aspects of this crisis, really, you know, the health crisis and the economic crisis, they are both born of the same common problem, which is the health crisis. You know, we can't begin to solve the economic crisis, the education crisis, until we get this pandemic under control. And I think that, you know, first and foremost, we need to have leaders who take this seriously, who are, you know, presenting a national strategy to control the pandemic. And that means, you know, a national policy around testing and tracing, and what are the best protocols to follow to contain the spread, to make sure that we are, yes, fast tracking a vaccine, but not circumventing science to get the vaccine to people on time. And there have been some serious concerns about that. When we look at, you know, the frontline workers who have been disproportionately impacted by this, from, you know, workers in our fields and factories, grocery stores, delivery people, you know, disproportionately, these are communities of color that have been forced back to work more so and on the front lines and with the least amount of protection. So, you know, labor protections for our frontline responders also have to be top of mind as we're thinking about reopening and getting this economy, you know, back on track. I talked to a lot of small business owners here throughout West Michigan, many of whom did not have the benefit of receiving any or sufficient PPP loans. And you know, we know that first and even second round of PPP went to larger businesses. You know, again, there is some merit to wanting to help out people who employ the most number of employees. Economically, you know, I can see the justification there. But we also know that, you know, the businesses that have under 100, under 50, under 25 employees, the mom and pop shops, are owned to a greater degree by communities of color than are the larger, 500 employees here. And those are individuals for whom, they relied on this business to help, propel their families forward out of generational poverty, and now have just been dealt a serious blow. I think it's so important that we elect leaders who understand that, who have seen that. For those of you who don't know about my background, I'm a civil rights lawyer. I have worked in the Department of Justice during the Obama administration, and back home here in our community, fighting for individuals, their civil rights and civil liberties. And, I think it takes someone who has seen those experiences firsthand and who understands those things to really be able to effectively fight for them in Congress.
Yeah, that's a good point. I tell everybody, proximity is critical. And what I mean by that, relationships are very critical, because you have to understand folks' lived experiences in order to really understand the struggle that many of us are going through, and to fight for policies that can provide some level of relief. So one of the things Representative Justin Amash did, he introduced legislation to end qualified immunity for law enforcement agents,
Yeah.
right? And you just like we all had a front row seat earlier this year with the horrific, what we consider horrific murder of Breonna Taylor, and many others, like our brother George Floyd, and there were many protests, not only here locally but across this country. Again, and I think at the end of the day, people of all races, creeds, colors, and sexualities are just fed up with the criminal justice system, period. So with respect to this legislation, is this something that you would agree to continue to fight for?
I think that is a piece of criminal justice reform that could be a very effective tool. I think that the problem, however, is that ending qualified immunity is not going to end every problem that we have in the criminal justice system right now. And in fact, I think a wholesale termination of qualified immunity could actually introduce more racial problems, actually. I think that, when it comes to criminal justice reform, I think sort of it, as Obama often described, there's sort of three prongs to it. And I would even add a fourth prong of just specifically addressing, some justice in policing. I do not support defunding the police. I have worked with far too many victims of domestic violence. President Jackson, I live over here on the southeast side by Martin Luther King Jr. Park. We just lost my neighbor and a volunteer. He was the city's 27th gun homicide 2 weekends ago. His mother is desperate to get justice for him. But we do need to address the injustices that happen. So to that end, when we look at justice in policing, I would support things like a national chokehold ban, support any initiatives that would introduce additional oversight and accountability, mandated dashboard cams, body cams. And in conversation with our local law enforcement, these are also additional oversights that they would welcome as well. De-escalation training, implicit bias training. We can't train our way out of this problem, however, and so there has to be mechanisms for accountability when individuals don't follow the training. I would support a national registry to track, police officers who, are removed or disciplined in one area so they can't just transfer to another. But that's just the policing prong. It doesn't get to the issues of systemic racism that disproportionately put communities of color in contact with the police or in the criminal justice system. And I think there's, sort of three additional prongs that we need to look at, and that comes to the courtroom, the cell block, and the community. When it comes to the courtroom, we need to look at the ways that we're sentencing individuals in this country. I believe in ending mandatory minimums, putting discretion back in the hands of the judges where it belongs. I don't believe in locking up nonviolent offenders. In the cell block, I think we need to introduce rehabilitation efforts, options for education and job training when individuals are incarcerated. And then when it comes to the community, and I think this is really where the crux of so much of the, the issues of systemic racism that we're looking at happen, we really need to look at racial disparities in education, in housing, in income, and begin to address those through reinvesting in our public schools, rooting out discriminatory practices in lending, and district lines for education throughout the region, and finally, making sure that individuals who do the toughest jobs in our community are paid a living wage for the work that they do.
Yeah, those are good. One of the things I want to just provide some level of clarification, because NAACP, not only the local branch, but the national office and our state conference, which is comprised of 40 plus branches across the state of Michigan, including adult and youth and college branches, support defunding, AKA reallocating. So I think the narrative has been misconstrued, right? So when, as a local branch, we were asked to support defunding, I unequivocally and very clearly said, I'm against defunding, right? And what I mean, so let me provide a definition of what I assume defunding is.
Yeah.
It's totally almost abolishing. People are expecting, when you talk about defunding, abolishing local law enforcement. That's not what we mean when we say defunding. What we mean is to reallocate resources, right? Yeah. So reallocate some of those resources into more of a community benefit type of strategy.
Yeah.
So not eliminating, officers or abolishing local law enforcement, but reallocating some of those resources, right, into things like behavioral health services, right, into things like strategic school-based relationship and trust building. Those sorts of things is when we say defunding, is not abolishing, eliminating. It is strictly reallocating some resources, because as you know, when and this was a study that was commissioned by the city of Grand Rapids a number of years ago, when they did basically, I'll call it a resource tracking study, or whatever you want to call it, where they went into the city police office or police department, here, Grand Rapids Police Department, and they kind of assessed workloads and, what are, officers, administrative staff and all of these folks doing, right? Is it efficient? Is it effective? And that study, which was paid for by the city of Grand Rapids, which was very clear, said that there was definitely not a need to hire any more officers. And also it suggested that they could significantly benefit from what I would say reallocating resources within these departments.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear in terms of, what I think those of us who have been on the front line saying defunding, it
Yeah.
really is a reallocation. Now, there is a difference between, however, I will say, abolishment
Yeah.
versus defunding. But
Sure.
I want to just be clear and say what the defunding movement is about reallocating resources.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for clarifying. I know people have, people have different things that they mean when they say that. And,
Right.
even though I have been clear that, when people talk about defunding, in terms of abolishment, I've been very clear that is not something I support. You know, I am still getting attacked, left and right for, being associated with wanting to defund the police. And, this, you know, fear mongering that is happening and coming out against, someone like me who has committed her life to, advocating for folks who have been disproportionately, impacted by systems that work against the poor and underserved. There is a deep racial tone to the attacks that are coming against me, against sort of saying she's too radical, she's too liberal. And I think it really does a disservice in our community as we're trying to work and build a safer and healthier community for everyone. But I would say, especially for our communities of color who have, disproportionately felt afraid and not able to have a healthy relationship with law enforcement in our community.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Again, it's we had talked earlier about before we started this conversation about some of the ads, and I can say it because I'm in the position to that Peter Myers has put out, and by the way, I will say this as a disclaimer: we invited Peter Myers to do the same thing that we're doing with you. It is my understanding that there was some the schedules didn't mesh, or there was not clear communication, whatever. But we did provide the opportunity, extended the invite to come on and have a conversation. And Peter, you're still welcome to come on. And even if you have 5 or 10 minutes, because one of the things that I said to you early on when we first had a conversation, and I said this to Representative Amash as well, a long time ago, you have to understand that you represent the 3rd Ward as well. Okay, so I'll just leave that right there. But one of the things I will say, when you talk about, when Obama put his plan out to reform, and I'm not only going to say policing, but the criminal justice system, you're absolutely right. He talked about the cell block, he talked about community, and then he talked about the court system, right? So I think when it comes to qualified immunity, this does not solve the entire problem.
Yeah.
And I think those of us who've been in this work, who are of good conscience, we know this. This is just one tool in the toolbox. Because one of the things that I strongly believe is that when you start to hit people in their personal pockets, they pay a little more attention. They pay a little more attention. They really do. And so that's just one tool.
Yeah.
And I think, but systemically, we have to do a lot of work in terms of reforming the court system, that cell block, and community. And specifically, when you had talked some about the cell block, we have to begin to prosecute rogue officers in that institution as well. And also we have to begin to hold, I don't care if you are an individual who's serving life, but if you are molesting, abusing people in that system,
Yep.
you need to be dealt with, and you need to be dealt with appropriately.
Absolutely.
We have to stop allowing not only the criminals within the system to continue to traumatize many individuals in this system, right?
Yep.
And also we have to stop allowing rogue officers in that system, and also administrators in that system, and owners in that system to be just as criminal as the criminals that they're responsible to quote unquote reform, right? Because
Yeah.
there's no reform happening on any level, in my opinion, in that system. So I think you're right. Looking at it globally,
Yeah.
as President Obama said, looking at those 3 C's, right? But I
Yep.
also think that when you have things that like qualified immunity, again, that's just one piece of a huge puzzle
Yeah.
that can have some definitely impact.
I agree.
So you mentioned also just people having the ability to, and I'll just paraphrase, to economically support themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we know there are many folks who are struggling. And let me say this as well for folks who will watch this. It's because I really want to remind people of this. And I think, and this is no, and let me, I'm going to say this in the kindest way possible, right? This is no indictment or put down for any voter, but we have many individuals who some of us will classify as low information voters, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what I would just challenge folks to do is to do your homework, have a plan, have a strategy, because we have to understand, people, that this time we have to not only be about getting out the vote on November the 3rd, but we have to really hold our elected officials accountable. Mm-hmm. and see the work through. Because the pandemic, COVID-19, before COVID-19, the Black community and the brown community and low wealth and poor white communities were already in the pandemic. Mm-hmm. We were already in a pandemic. What this virus did is it just totally exposed the system for what it is.
Yeah.
It totally did. So I want all of us to remember, when we are making these decisions, that we were in a pandemic way before COVID-19 showed up on the scene. So one of the questions, Hillary, and this is off of a comment that you made that I have for you, and I think the audience would be interested in this, is, do you support at least a $15 minimum wage?
I do. Yeah, I absolutely do. Yeah, that's an easy one. And again, I'm happy to expound on it, but I mean, the answer is definitely yes. When we look at, all of the struggles that we're facing in our community right now, so much of it comes down to the fact that, the people that do the hardest work in this community are not getting paid even close to, what their work is worth. And, I'm a middle-class mom who understands, what it's like to have to pay your mortgage every month and pay your student loans every month. And as an attorney, I certainly, I have, even at a nonprofit, I have had the luxury of making more than $15 an hour, and it's still not enough to support my, my family of 4. This is such a crucial issue, and we need individuals who understand, this issue, that, when we're giving tax cuts again to, millionaires and billionaires, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act from 2017, 83% of those benefits went to the top 1% in this country. And the rest of us got 17% to split among ourselves. And still, it increased our federal deficit by close to $1 trillion. And now, the administration is saying, oh, whoa, we got this big deficit. We can't afford to pay for things like Social Security and Medicare, promises to our seniors who have worked their entire lives paying into these earned benefit. They're not, giveaways. These are earned benefit systems that, folks rely on in their most crucial time. So, that's not an option for me. And those are, exactly the type of crony deals and giveaways that really caused me to raise my hand and run. As a mother, as someone living in the sandwich generation, worrying about my aging parents and my, young kids, and still paying her student loans, a public interest lawyer in this community. I realized that, we needed someone who deeply understood these issues and who would fight for them in Washington.
Yeah, no, that's good. So, and just a point of clarification as well. So you will support it. When will you fight for it? Strongly fight for this?
I think it has to be part of the next economic recovery. I have, in addition to, doing immigration and civil rights work, employment rights has been my bread and butter here. I was, really proud to be chair of the employment and labor section of the Grand Rapids Bar Association, the first employee side attorney to hold that position in a long time. We need people who understand the struggle of workers. I'm so proud to be endorsed by almost 25 unions who have seen my commitment to supporting workers and increasing not only their access to a living wage. And by the way, I think we need more than $15 an hour when it comes to our frontline workers working through this crisis. And I think we need to pay our teachers more than that, in particular, for everything that they do. But worker safety, making sure that our workers are protected, that they have the health care that they need for putting themselves in dangerous health situations to do their job.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. 15, I think is a jump from where we currently are, based on, I think, the federal minimum wage at $7.25 an hour. And
Sure.
And when you look at the state of Michigan, it's like $9.25 an hour. But I think if we could get there immediately and not gradually, and then also take into consideration the ongoing rate of inflation, and taking that into consideration as well. I think we will make, again, it's a step in the right direction, and it's a tool, one of the tools in the toolbox that could help a lot of folks out that desperately need it. In closing, Hillary, anything else? Any final words?
I just want to say, thank you for the opportunity to address your members. I am, as a woman, a mother, a public interest lawyer who has, walked hand in hand with folks in this community when they've struggled. A person of deep faith. Everything I care about is on the line in 2020. And I raised my hand to run because I knew we needed a representative who deeply understands how the policies we create in Washington, D.C. impact people here on the ground. I am a representative who will make herself available to our constituents. I look at this as a partnership. I can't make good laws and be a good voice for the people of West Michigan if I'm not listening and hearing from each and every one of you. So if you're interested in learning more, asking questions, or getting involved, you can visit us on the web at HIllarySchulten.com. Feel free to send us an email to info@HillarySchulten.com. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yes, you as well.
All right.